Neither of them answered. Neither of them denied it. That silence hurt more than any confession could have. The taxi driver climbed out and quietly removed Emily's duffel from the trunk. He looked toward the porch, sensing he had accidentally become a witness to something deeply personal. "I can leave your bags here," he said gently. Emily never took her eyes off Daniel. "Thank you." He nodded once, got back into the cab, and drove away. Now there was nowhere left to hide. Daniel finally found his voice. "I can explain." Emily actually laughed. It wasn't a laugh of amusement. It was the sharp, disbelieving sound someone makes when reality has become too absurd to process. "You can explain," she repeated. "Which part?" She pointed toward the house. "The little girl?" Then at Lily. "My best friend?" Then the family sign hanging beside the front door. "Or the fact that my last name disappeared from my own home?" Daniel swallowed hard. "It's not what you think." Emily's expression hardened. Every cheating husband in America has used that sentence. Lily suddenly stepped off the porch. "Emily, please." Emily raised one hand. "Don't." Lily froze. "You don't get to say my name." Fresh tears streamed down Lily's face. "I never wanted to hurt you." Emily looked at her with disbelief. "You married my husband." "I know. You moved into my house." "I know. You let me spend 14 months believing you were protecting my family." "I know." Each quiet admission felt like another knife twisting deeper. Emily had imagined this reunion 1,000 different ways during deployment. She had imagined tears, laughter, long embraces. She had imagined falling asleep beside Daniel while telling him stories she'd never dared share over video calls. Never once had she imagined standing outside her own home, feeling like a complete stranger. Daniel took another cautious step. "Emily, there were things you don't know." She looked at him with icy calm. "Then educate me." He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Because there was no version of events that made what she was seeing acceptable. Lily finally spoke. "It started after..." She stopped herself. Daniel immediately looked toward her. "Lily." His tone carried a warning. Emily caught it instantly. There was something they weren't saying. Something both of them already knew. "What started?" Emily demanded. Neither answered. The silence stretched until Emily shook her head. "You know what?" She bent down, grabbed her duffel, and slung it over her shoulder. "I'm done asking questions." She turned toward the sidewalk. Daniel's panic became obvious. "Emily, wait!" She kept walking. "I have nowhere else to go," she said, without turning around. "Funny, isn't it? I owned that house this morning." Lily suddenly hurried after her. "Please don't leave." Emily spun around. The look on her face stopped Lily cold. "You spent over a year living the life that belonged to me." Her voice was quiet now, steady, controlled. The kind of control forged by years in uniform. "You don't get to ask me for anything." She walked toward the street. Daniel followed several steps behind. "At least let me explain." Emily stopped walking but didn't face him. "When did you marry her?" Daniel closed his eyes. 8 months ago." Emily's shoulders stiffened. "So while I was sleeping in a tent halfway across the world, you were planning another wedding." Daniel looked physically ill. "It wasn't like that." She turned slowly. "I wore body armor every day because I believed I had something worth coming home to." The words landed like blows. Lily began sobbing openly. Emily looked at her one last time. "I trusted you more than my own sister." Then she walked away. Neither of them followed. Neither of them knew that Emily had survived ambushes, rocket attacks, and the loss of brothers and sisters in combat. But what neither Daniel nor Lily understood was this: the strongest people don't break in the moment they're betrayed. They become terrifyingly calm. Because somewhere beneath the heartbreak, a soldier's instincts quietly take over. And before the sun set that evening, Emily would discover something inside that house that would prove this betrayal hadn't begun while she was deployed. It had started long before she ever boarded the plane overseas. Emily walked until the neighborhood disappeared behind her. She didn't know where she was going. She only knew she couldn't stand on that street another second. The July heat pressed down on her shoulders, but compared to the deserts she'd crossed overseas, it barely registered. Her boots carried her almost automatically, one step after another, until she reached a small riverside park overlooking the water. She sat on an empty bench. For the first time since landing, she allowed herself to cry. Not loudly, not dramatically. The tears simply came, silent and steady, while children played on a nearby swing set and a young couple shared ice cream as if the world hadn't just collapsed. She wiped her face after a few minutes. Training took over. When emotions become overwhelming, gather facts, assess the situation, never make decisions with incomplete intelligence. That lesson had kept her alive overseas. It might save her now. She reached into her pocket and unlocked her phone. The first call she made wasn't to Daniel. It was to the county property records office. 20 minutes later, after navigating automated menus and speaking with a polite clerk, she had her first answer. "No, ma'am," the clerk said. "The property was transferred approximately 9 months ago." And Emily felt her stomach tighten. Transferred? Yes. To whom? There was a brief pause as keys clicked. The current owners are Daniel Harris and Lily Harris. Emily closed her eyes. "So my name isn't listed on the deed." Her fingers tightened around the phone. "How is that possible?" "I'm sorry, ma'am. I can only provide public records. If you believe there was fraud, you'll need to speak with an attorney." Fraud. The word echoed in her mind long after the call ended. She immediately opened her banking app. At first glance, everything seemed normal. Then she noticed something strange. A savings account she and Daniel had spent years building together was gone. She refreshed the screen. Nothing. She searched every account. Nothing. A cold knot formed in her chest. Another phone call, this time to her bank. After several security questions, the representative spoke carefully. "I'm sorry, Captain Carter. According to our records, you requested to close the joint savings account 11 months ago." Emily nearly laughed. "I was in eastern Syria 11 months ago." The representative hesitated. "There is a notarized authorization attached to the request." Emily's pulse slowed. Not sped up. Slowed. Combat had taught her something strange about fear. The more dangerous a situation became, the calmer she grew. "I'd like a copy of every document." "Of course. It'll be sent to your secure email within the hour." She ended the call. This wasn't just betrayal anymore. Someone had impersonated her. Someone had signed legal documents in her name. Someone had stolen years of savings while she was deployed serving her country. And suddenly, Daniel's desperate insistence that he could explain sounded very different. This wasn't a guilty husband asking forgiveness. This sounded like a man terrified of being caught. By early evening, Emily checked into a modest hotel near the interstate. The young receptionist smiled warmly when she saw the military uniform. "Military discount?" Emily nodded. "Just got home today. Welcome back." Those two simple words nearly broke her again. She carried her duffel into room 214 and locked the door behind her. The room was small, plain, quiet. It was the first place she'd felt safe all day. Her laptop connected to the hotel's Wi-Fi. Within minutes, the promised email from the bank arrived. Emily downloaded the attached documents. The signature on the authorization looked almost perfect. Almost. If someone glanced at it casually, they'd believe she'd signed it herself. But Emily noticed what most people wouldn't. She always crossed the T in Carter with a slight upward stroke. This signature didn't. She always looped the second E in Emily. This one didn't. It was an excellent forgery. But it was still a forgery. She printed the documents using the business center downstairs and spread them across the bed. One fake signature. Property transfer paperwork. Account closures. Power of attorney forms she'd never seen before. The deeper she looked, the worse it became. Then something caught her eye. One witness signature. Rebecca Nolan. Emily frowned. She knew that name. Where? She closed her eyes. Then it hit her. Rebecca Nolan. Lily's cousin. A notary public. Emily leaned back slowly. This wasn't impulsive. This wasn't emotional. This had been organized, planned, executed, like an operation. The realization sent a chill through her body. She wasn't looking at a marriage that happened after she left. She was looking at a conspiracy that had likely begun before deployment. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost ignored it. Instead, she answered. "This is Captain Emily Carter." Silence. Then, "Emily." It was an older woman's voice, soft, uncertain. Emily searched her memory. "Who's this?" "My name is Margaret Dawson." The name meant nothing. "I think," the woman hesitated. "I think we need to meet." Emily remained silent. "I used to work at Harper & Collins Legal." Emily's attention sharpened. "The law firm that handled your property paperwork." Her heartbeat quickened for the first time in hours. "What about it?" Another long pause. "I retired 3 months ago." "So?" "Because I couldn't live with what I saw." Emily stood from the bed. "What did you see?" Margaret lowered her voice to almost a whisper. "I saw documents signed in your name, while military deployment records clearly showed you were thousands of miles away." Emily felt every muscle in her body tense. "I reported it." "What happened?" "They told me to stay quiet." "Who?" "I can't explain over the phone." Emily walked toward the window. Outside, headlights streamed along the highway. Normal people living normal lives, completely unaware that hers had just become something else entirely. Margaret spoke again. "If you want the truth, meet me tomorrow morning." "Where?" "The Blue Lantern Cafe." Emily grabbed a pen. "What time?" 9. Before Emily could ask another question, Margaret added one final sentence. "The people who betrayed you aren't the only ones hiding secrets." The line went dead. Emily slowly lowered the phone. For the first time since returning home, this no longer felt like the story of a broken marriage. It felt like the beginning of something far darker. Because if Margaret Dawson was telling the truth, Daniel and Lily hadn't simply stolen Emily's husband, her home, and her future. Someone with legal authority had helped them do it. Here's the next installment, continuing directly from the previous ending. Emily barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the family sign hanging beside the front door. The Harris family. 4 simple words. 4 words that had erased an entire life. At 8:45 the next morning, she parked outside the Blue Lantern Cafe. It was an old brick building tucked beside the river, the kind of place where retired couples lingered over coffee, and everyone seemed to know the waitress by name. Emily stepped inside. The scent of fresh coffee and cinnamon rolls filled the air. In the far corner, a woman in her late 60s slowly raised a hand. "You must be Emily." Margaret Dawson looked exactly like someone who had spent a lifetime behind legal paperwork. Neatly pressed blouse, reading glasses resting on a chain around her neck. A leather folder sat unopened beside her coffee. Emily slid into the booth. "You said you saw documents signed while I was overseas." Margaret nodded. "I did." "Then tell me everything." Margaret took a slow breath. "I worked in estate and property law for 34 years. She paused. "I've seen messy divorces, ugly inheritance battles, even families forge signatures. But I'd never seen someone attempt to erase an active duty soldier from her own life." Emily's jaw tightened. "It started almost a year and a half ago. Before you deployed." Emily frowned. "Before?" Margaret nodded. "I remember, because your husband came into the office asking hypothetical questions." "What kind of questions?" "If a spouse disappears for military service, how difficult would transferring jointly owned property be?" Emily felt something cold settle in her chest. "He was planning this. Before I ever left." Margaret slowly nodded. "I didn't realize it then. He acted like he was asking out of curiosity." She opened the leather folder. Inside were photocopies. Emails, internal memos, appointment logs. I kept copies after I became suspicious. Emily carefully looked through them. One appointment, then another, then another. Daniel's name appeared repeatedly, sometimes alone, sometimes with Lily. The earliest appointment was 3 weeks before Emily deployed. Emily stared at the date. I was packing for deployment that week. Margaret looked down. I know, Emily whispered almost to herself. He hugged me goodbye, while planning how to take everything I owned. Silence settled over the table. Finally, Margaret slid one final document across. This is why I contacted you. Emily unfolded it. It wasn't property paperwork. It wasn't banking paperwork. It was a marriage license application. Applicant 1, Daniel Harris. Applicant 2, Lily Monroe. Application date, 5 days before Emily deployed. Emily read the date again, then a third time. Her voice was barely audible. No, they couldn't. Margaret's eyes filled with regret. They never completed that application. But they intended to. Emily slowly leaned back. Every memory from those final days before deployment suddenly felt different. Lily insisting on helping her pack. Daniel volunteering to organize financial paperwork. Both of them constantly reassuring her. Don't worry about anything. We'll take care of everything. They had, just not for her. Emily closed the folder. When did they actually marry? 8 months ago. Why wait? Margaret hesitated. Because they needed something first. Emily looked up. What? You. Emily frowned. What does that mean? They needed everyone to believe you weren't coming home. Emily's heartbeat slowed. What are you talking about? Margaret lowered her voice. There were rumors. What rumors? That your convoy had been attacked. Emily's eyes widened. It was. Margaret nodded. I know. It made local news. Emily remembered that day vividly. 2 soldiers had died. She'd escaped with only a concussion. Communication had been cut off for nearly 2 weeks. When families back home couldn't reach their loved ones. Fear spread quickly. Margaret continued. Someone began telling people your chances of surviving were almost 0. Emily's expression hardened. I never authorized anyone to say that. No, you didn't. Margaret looked directly into her eyes. Daniel did. The words landed with horrifying force. He told neighbors. He told church friends. He even told people at my office that the military had privately prepared him for the worst. Emily's fists slowly clenched beneath the table. He made everyone believe I was already dead. Margaret nodded once. Most people thought he was grieving. Emily remembered all the sympathy cards piled in Daniel's social media photos from months earlier. She had assumed they were supporting a military spouse going through deployment. Now she understood. People hadn't been comforting a lonely husband. They had been comforting a widower, who wasn't actually a widower. A man performing grief while his wife was still risking her life overseas. Margaret reached into her purse. I have one more thing. She handed Emily a small flash drive. I copied security footage before I retired. Emily looked confused. Security footage? Our conference room cameras. They record every client meeting. I wasn't supposed to keep it, but something about those meetings bothered me. Emily turned the flash drive over in her hand. What's on it? You'll see Daniel. You'll see Lily. Emily nodded. I expected that. Margaret's face grew pale. No, you won't. Emily frowned. What do you mean? Margaret looked around the cafe before leaning closer. The first time they came into my office, they weren't alone. Emily felt every instinct sharpen. Who was with them? Margaret answered quietly. A man wearing a U.S. Army dress uniform. Emily's breathing stopped. What? He introduced himself as someone who knew your deployment schedule. Emily stared at her. He had military credentials. He vouched for everything Daniel told us. He convinced everyone the paperwork was legitimate. Emily's voice was almost a whisper. Did you ever learn his name? Margaret nodded. I'll never forget it. She carefully slid a yellow sticky note across the table. One name, 6 letters. Major Ryan Cole. Emily looked at the name for several long seconds. Then her face drained of color, because she knew exactly who Major Ryan Cole was. He hadn't just served in the same brigade. He had been the officer who signed her deployment orders, and 6 months earlier, he had personally pinned a Bronze Star medal onto her uniform. I'll conclude the story with a complete, emotionally satisfying ending that resolves every major plot thread. Emily didn't touch the coffee. She didn't say another word inside the cafe. She simply picked up the flash drive, folded the sticky note with Major Ryan Cole's name, thanked Margaret Dawson, and walked outside. The morning sun reflected off the river, calm and bright, completely indifferent to the storm raging inside her. She sat in her rental car for several minutes before inserting the flash drive into her laptop. The first video opened. A timestamp appeared in the corner. 3 weeks before deployment. Daniel entered the conference room first. Lily followed close behind. Then the door opened one last time. Major Ryan Cole stepped inside, wearing his army dress uniform. Emily watched silently. The recording had no audio, but body language often spoke louder than words. Cole shook Daniel's hand. Lily smiled comfortably, not politely, comfortably, like they already knew one another. The three of them spent nearly an hour reviewing documents before leaving together. Emily opened the second recording. Another meeting, another week. More paperwork, more signatures, more smiles. Then the final recording, 8 months earlier. Daniel and Lily signed their marriage documents. Cole stood nearby as a witness. Emily slowly closed the laptop. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was criminal. By noon, Emily drove straight to the regional office of the Army's Criminal Investigation Division. She walked in wearing the same uniform she'd landed in the day before. A young staff sergeant behind the desk looked up. "Can I help you, ma'am?" Emily placed the flash drive, the forged documents, the bank records, and the property paperwork neatly on the counter. "I need to report identity fraud, financial fraud, and possible misconduct involving an active duty officer." Within minutes, she was escorted into an interview room. For nearly 4 hours, investigators listened. They asked questions. They copied evidence. They requested deployment records. They photographed signatures. When Emily finished, the senior investigator closed the folder. "Captain Carter." He looked her directly in the eyes. "If what you've shown us is verified, this is far bigger than a family dispute." It is. The investigation moved faster than Emily expected. Fraud leaves a trail. Bank transfers, property filings, electronic signatures, phone records, security footage. Everything Daniel and Lily had believed was safely hidden had been preserved somewhere. Within 3 weeks, search warrants were executed, computers were seized, financial accounts were frozen. Rebecca Nolan admitted she had notarized documents without Emily ever appearing before her. She lost her commission and later pleaded guilty to fraud-related charges. Major Ryan Cole's military emails revealed something even worse. Daniel had approached him before Emily deployed, offering investment opportunities in exchange for help navigating military paperwork. Cole never expected Emily to return with enough evidence to expose him. He was relieved of duty pending court-martial proceedings. Daniel and Lily were arrested on multiple counts, including identity theft, forgery, wire fraud, and conspiracy. The local news covered the story for weeks. Neighbors who had once brought Daniel casseroles believing he was mourning his wife watched in disbelief as federal agents carried boxes from the house. Months later, Emily finally walked back through the front door of the farmhouse. This time, she wasn't alone. A federal marshal handed her a small envelope. "The court finalized everything this morning. Inside was a certified order restoring legal ownership of the property to Emily Carter. Every fraudulent transfer had been voided, every forged document invalidated. Every dollar investigators could recover had been returned. The house was hers again." She stepped inside. It felt strangely empty, not because the furniture was gone, because the illusion was. She wandered from room to room. In the attic, she found an old cardboard box she'd packed years earlier. Inside were photographs, a movie ticket from her first date with Daniel, their wedding program, a handwritten note he'd once left in her lunchbox. For a moment, she considered keeping them. Then she smiled sadly. Those memories belonged to a version of Daniel that no longer existed. She closed the box, carried it outside, and placed it in the trash, not out of anger, out of acceptance. Autumn arrived. Emily transformed the property one project at a time. Fresh paint, new flowers, a rebuilt porch swing. One afternoon, a moving truck pulled into the driveway next door. An elderly Marine veteran named Frank Wilson climbed out, leaning heavily on a cane. "You must be my new neighbor," he said. Emily laughed. "I guess I am." Over the following months, Frank became family in the quiet way veterans often do. And no unnecessary questions, no pity, just respect. He introduced her to a local nonprofit that helped returning service members rebuild their civilian lives. Emily began volunteering. She met young soldiers struggling with invisible wounds, military spouses overwhelmed by long deployments, veterans who believed no one understood. She did. Not because she'd read about hardship, because she'd survived it. Nearly a year after returning home, Emily stood before a room full of newly deployed families. She looked around at anxious spouses, worried parents, and hopeful children. Then she smiled. "When I came home," she began, "I believed everything I'd built had been stolen from me." The room fell silent. I was wrong. What was stolen were my possessions, my title, my house, my marriage. She paused. But no one ever stole my character. No one stole my integrity. And no one, not betrayal, not greed, not lies, could take away the woman I chose to be. After the applause faded, a young military wife approached with tears in her eyes. I needed to hear that. Emily squeezed her hand. So did I. That evening, Emily drove home beneath a sky streaked with orange and gold. She parked in the driveway and looked toward the front porch. The old family sign was gone. In its place hung a simple wooden plaque. No last names, no promises carved in wood, just 3 words: "Welcome home." Emily unlocked the front door, stepped inside, and smiled. For the first time in a very long time, she wasn't returning to the life she'd lost. She was finally living the one she'd earned.